to welcome our listeners to this week's episode of the Winning Response podcast. I am so thankful that Amber agreed to be a part of this. I've known Amber for many years. Our kids went to school together, and I remember it marked me, obviously, because I think it's been over a decade
It
that
has.
you had kind of opened up and shared your heart with me and a little bit of your story. And as Jen and I came together and we're like, who has really amazing testimonies of what God has done in their marriage? You came on my heart. And so I'm so thankful that you're willing to share your story. And if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from and your kids and how long you've been married, that'd be great.
Okay, yes. Thank you guys so much for having me. And I just want you guys to know and the listeners to know that I've been praying about this a lot. And I'm excited for what God is going to do through this. And our story, our testimony is one of restoration and hope. And so that's exactly what I'm hoping for with this podcast for the listeners. So anyway, yes, my name is Amber Harmon, and I live in Branson, but I grew up in Reed Spring, which is just a small little town outside of Branson. And my husband grew up in Forsyth, and we like to joke that we met in the middle. Branson, right in the middle of the two towns. And so this is where God has planted us, and we've raised our kids. So we have 4 kids. Right now, they range from age 16 to 21, which is just insane. We have teenagers and young adults. And I think, having kids at the very beginning, people would always say, like, wait till they become teenagers, or, that these horror stories. But actually, I have so enjoyed the teenage years and young adult ages. And so it's definitely a new season, but we love it so much. And Matt and I have been married we just celebrated 20 years. And so it's crazy. We have our 4 children. Our first daughter, Kirsten, she was 2.5 whenever we first got married. So we have 3 children together, and 2 of them are in college. One's getting ready to graduate, and one is getting ready to start driving a car. So
So, as I said, we're doing this marriage. Well, actually, it's a relationship series right now. We have had some people tell their stories in all different aspects. And what is your story in regards to marriage?
So I would say our story is one of restoration, and there is so much to it. And I just prayed that the Lord would just help me remember the details that people need to hear as I tell it. So, do you want me to go ahead and start sharing our
Yeah,
testimony?
maybe just share kind of how you guys met and as much of your testimony as you want to share. Whatever you have on your heart. I know you said that you prayed about this. I believe there's going to be deposits that you will have that the Lord's given you that you will deposit into other people's life that will help them who may be dealing with some of the same issues or can relate in some way. So I trust whatever you have in your heart.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I think what I'd like to do is kind of share first off that I grew up in a home that did not actively go to church. My parents both believed in God, but we did not actively go to church. And so I did not really turn my life over to the Lord until I was 18 years old. And so whenever I did that, I remember I had a youth pastor who said, you need to fall in love with Jesus before you fall in love with any boys. And so I went on a journey to fall in love with Jesus, and I met my husband, Matt, about a year into that. And we met in Branson at Ruby Tuesday, and he was my server, and I was with some friends, and I thought he was cute and left him my phone number. So it's actually kind of an embarrassing story for me sometimes, but he likes to tell that part. But anyway, so we met and we dated for a year and a half before we got married. And actually, he had grown up in church, and so when we first got together, he would tell me, he had all the answers. He was going to a Christian college, and he would share with me scripture, and anyway, he had such a knowledge for God. And I, at the time, was still learning, but I had such a heart for the Lord. And so, anyway, after we had begun dating, we had been dating for about a year, and it got a little rocky. And we ended up getting pregnant. And we at that point, whenever I told him I was pregnant, he was like, all right, let's get married, like that's the right thing to do. And so we got married thinking that was going to fix everything. And I think that's the number one thing that we look back on, and we thought we were going to marriage was just going to fix everything because we were going to be doing everything right at that point. And we both knew what was right, but we had kind of fallen away and we're not following the Lord. So we got pregnant. We got married 8 weeks later. And shortly after that, we also had found out that he had a daughter who was 2.5, and that was Kirsten. And so, just, starting this brand new marriage, we are, already facing these things. But what we didn't realize too going into it, thinking that getting married was just going to fix everything, is that we are also bringing in baggage from both sides. And I think that's a key thing. And so, anyway, we get married. We end up finding ourselves 3.5 years into marriage, and we had 4 kids if you count them all together. So it was like kid after kid. And we kind of joke around because things were hard and rocky, yet we kept making up because we kept having children too. So, it's kind of a funny part of the story. But anyway, so we found ourselves in this young marriage with several young children. And at the time, I was still seeking the Lord, and I wanted to raise my family to follow him, and Matt did too. But what we found out was that I had this like heart relationship with the Lord, but Matt's was really based off of knowledge. And so through I would say the first 5 to 6 years, it was really tough. And we lived in this trailer. Because we had no money, he was still in school. And so we actually lived in this trailer on my family's land. And every day he would go to school, go to work, and I would just be praying all day long because that was the only thing I knew to do, because I knew there was something wrong. I didn't know what it was. And so I would just pray. And sometimes he would come home and I would be like, hey, the Lord told me this. And one time he came home and I had placed Post-its all over our trailer of like, God owns this, because I knew there was an issue with our marriage and I didn't know exactly what it was. And so I just was trying to fully surrender everything to him. And so he would come home being like, oh no, what has the Lord told you today? And finally, one day I was just really struggling, and I called my best friend at the time. Her name is Lacey. I called her and I'm just venting to her, and I'm telling her, all these things, how I'm unhappy and I don't know what else to do. I've been praying, and I was really thinking, as a friend, she would be like, siding with me. And so actually a good friend doesn't do that. But she said, I really think that she told me a story, and this is just stuck out in my mind all these years later. It's such a pivotal point. She told me a story about a lady who prayed for her husband for 30 days on her hands and knees. And I was like, I have been praying, but I had not gotten down on my hands and knees and prayed yet and fully surrendered this over. And so I was like, fine, I will do that. And so she said, yes, she did it for 30 days. Her and her husband ended up, there was a miracle that happened, and then her husband ended up in ministry as a pastor. And I was like, this great story. So I'm like, okay, I was encouraged by it. So I was like, okay, so let's do this. So I that time got down on my hands and my knees and I began to pray. And I remember that trailer, the carpet it was green and rough like turf. And so till this day, I can remember exactly what that carpet felt like on my face. So I was not only on my knees, I was on my face, and I was praying for a miracle for my marriage. And 30 days go by, nothing. It seems like it's getting worse. 60 days go by, 90 days go by, and it just feels like I'm not getting any answers. I'm not seeing any improvement, and it's just continuously getting worse. And then about 30, I think I try to think back on it today, 30, I would say 30 weeks later. No, maybe it's 30 more, 30 months. That was a long time. Um, I end up finding myself in an attorney's office across from my husband, and we ended up getting a divorce. And um that day was really difficult, but at the same time, I felt like I had been pursuing the Lord, and it just seemed like it had come to that. And there was a sense of peace, I guess. I don't know how to explain it other than I felt like I had remembered, what God's word said, that he would never leave us nor forsake us, and he was going to be there with me through it all. I had ended up finding out that my husband had been unfaithful, and that was kind of the deciding factor. And whenever I said, what are we going to do? Just like when he was like, let's get married, it was kind of like, well, let's get a divorce. And so it quickly happened. I mean, we had the conversation, and 30 days, I feel like 30 days continues to be the theme here, 30, but 30 days later, we're in an office and we're getting a divorce. But during that time, I did see a small little change in him, and we were in that office, and I remember that day, and I could see a little bit of a glimpse of a change in him. But anyway, we go ahead with the divorce. We don't even fight. Like, we don't fight over money. We don't fight over the kids. It was weirdly like the easiest thing. And in that sense, it was the easiest thing. It was is really, really hard for me, and I had to get an apartment with the kids. And I had at the time, I had this song that talks about I'm still a dreamer, a believer, and I just like clung to that at the time. And I even had it painted like going all the way up our stairs, so to remind myself every single day that I'm still a dreamer. I'm still a believer. I'm not going to lose my faith in the Lord just because we just went through this divorce. And about a month after we had signed the divorce papers, well, during that time, though, I don't want to miss this part. I had gotten so tired of praying, but I still wanted to surrender everything to him. And so instead of my long prayers and on my face prayers, it started to look more like, before I went to bed, it was, Lord, let it be your will, not mine. And I never would have thought that restoration would be something that could happen with us. And so even whenever I was praying that prayer, I truly just wanted the God's will, or I just wanted God's will, not mine. And so during that time, Matt, his side of it was after we had signed the divorce papers and I had moved out with the kids, he one day came home and the whole house was empty. And he said that he just broke. And he said that in the kitchen, he just walked in, saw everything gone, and he just fell to the floor in the kitchen, and he began to pray. And he said, Lord, he just surrendered right then and there and said, Lord, I have a lot of broken pieces, but they can all be yours if you will take them. And he just surrendered everything that day. And he got a mentor and he started getting some counseling. And I remember he dropped the kids off with me one day and he told me, he's like, Amber, God is doing something in me and I am changing. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'll believe it when I see it. I've been praying about this for a long time. I thought it was gonna be 30 days, but a lot longer. But at the same time, I was praying for God's will, not mine. And I remember one Sunday he brought the kids home, and the girls' hair were put up in ponytails. And I was like, well, like, who did your hair? And they're like, Daddy did. And I was like, how did he know how to do that? And they're like, yeah, we went to church today and he did our hair. And I was like, what? Really? So I had asked him about it, and he said that he watched a YouTube video to learn how to put the girl's hair up in a ponytail. But for me, that was just like a gift, like to see what the Lord was doing in him. And I just was blown away at that. And after the after some time with him going to counseling and getting mentorship from someone who was a pastor who had gone through a similar situation and had restored his family, he I just started seeing like little things about him that I could tell what he had told me about God really doing something with him, that it was actually truth. And so finally one day he had dropped the kids off, and when he would bring me the kids, we began to talk more. And he asked me if I'd be willing to go to dinner with him and talk about the possibility of restoring our family. And I said yes, that I would do that. And the whole time, with praying for God's will, I just always felt like when my friends would talk to me about him, or anyone would talk to me about him, I would just say, he's my family still. I don't know how to explain it. I know we're divorced, but he's still my family. And so I think God just kept my heart open to him, and for me to be able to see it too. And so then we went to dinner, and then his mentor suggested that we start going to counseling and seeing what it would look like with us restoring our family. And so we did that, and it was a long process. It was really, really difficult. We went to several sessions. We did an intensive. And right before our intensive, we had told the mentor that we wanted to go ahead and remarry. And he's like, not until you do this intensive. And so we we went forward with the intensive, and then I think it was about 8 months. We ended up on one sunny Saturday in the fall. We went and got rings at this jewelry store. We went to Target, got matching outfits for our kids. We asked them what kind of refreshments they would want if for a little party after our wedding, and they decided on root beer and s'mores. And we went in the middle of the field in Branson, and we got married our second time, but we wrote our own vows this time. We had one witness and then our children, of course, and we ended up getting remarried, and God has fully restored our marriage. And I think it's been 14 years. And so it's been amazing. And some people said that they wouldn't call it a miracle until it had been so many years, but it was definitely a miracle from the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. You talked about during that time how you prayed, and the power of prayer. And when you were saying, those nights where you just go to bed and you'd say, Lord, your will be done. That to me was one of those times where it talks about a mustard seed sized faith. Like
Yeah.
that's all you had. There's times in life where it's like you could sit there for an hour and pour your heart out, and sometimes it's like a simple help me, God. How did the Lord strengthen you during that time? What did you do to keep yourself rooted in God at that time? When a lot of people will run away from the Lord when things are
Right.
hard and they don't understand, what kept you solid in your relationship with God?
That is such a good question. And I think that at the time, there were people who tried to pull me away a little bit. But I think giving my life over to him when I was 18 years old was such a big thing in my life, and I saw him take me from such a broken place to seeing what it's like to live with him, and I never wanted anything different. And so what I remember, I listened to a lot of Christian worship music. That was the only way I could sleep at night, because I was so used to sleeping by him that at night I would turn on worship music, and that would be the only way I could sleep. And I think that prayer was huge. There were a couple of people in my life who, Lacey being one of them, who was okay telling me what I didn't want to hear sometimes. And so she played such a big part in that. I think the Lord put her in my life for that reason. And so she helped me stay strong. And I think that one of the things, whenever we were married in our first marriage, I would almost, I looked to Matt as he almost became an idol in my life. And I looked to him as being almost like my savior, even though I had given my life over to the Lord and I was still seeking him. I idolized him, and I thought that if I had him, everything would be perfect and easy. And when I didn't have him anymore, I just looked towards the Lord and I saw him as that, and that he was going to he was who I needed, and it wasn't Matt. So he became number one in my life as a priority, where in my first marriage, he was more, I feel like I put God on the back burner a little bit and I put Matt number one. And so since we've been remarried, that has been we kind of laugh about it, because I'm like, I love you so much, Matt, but I know I'm okay, because I've got the Lord and he's number one. And I feel like that actually has brought comfort to both of us, that we have not put each other up as an idol, that instead we keep God first. And so, anyway, I would say prayer, worship music, and a good community.
Through this and this whole process, I love the story of redemption, and but you had to go through some time to forgive, to be at a place where you forgave what had happened. And how did you navigate that? I think that's a big thing for a lot of people in marriage, whether they go to divorce or maybe they're in a marriage and they're not happy because things have happened and there's unforgiveness there, and that we know that's a big part of being able to move forward and have a healthy relationship, is dealing with that unforgiveness. How were you able to navigate and get to a place of forgiveness?
I think whenever I think about forgiveness and our forgiveness, specifically in our marriage, I believe it's been a journey, and it wasn't just like one day that I was like, oh, I can forgive him and everything is great now. It's truly been a journey, and again, I it's through prayer, and every single time I have had a trigger, or there was some sort of like, because there was trauma from this, and like I said, he had been unfaithful and I had my own things too. I think coming to realize that we were both imperfect people whenever we got married, and that we both brought baggage into it. And even though, we could put on a piece of paper and draw a line down the center of like what Amber has done and what Matt has done, we both were sinners. We both brought in baggage, and we both contributed to the issue and to the problem. And I think realizing that I played a part of that as well kind of helped me in that. He's been so great in forgiving me, and I know that my process has been a little bit more difficult. I think prayer has been another thing in that, because I just remember going through, seeing certain people at ball games, at schools that I didn't want to see, having certain triggers of places. Every single time I would get to that place, I would just pray through it. And I just refused for the enemy to let my mind be a playground for him in my marriage. And so I was just like, no, you can't have that. I'm taking every thought captive, and I'm going to pray through this. And as I began to do that, those places and those people where the response that I had were no longer such like a physical response or an emotional response, and it actually was just peace in it. And then I was able to forgive him. I was able to forgive others through that process.
That's amazing.
So good, so powerful.
This is a beautiful story of redemption and restoration. What are some of the things that the Lord has restored to your marriage? You said you dealt with the infidelity.
Mhm.
Have you restored trust? And, what are some of the things that He's restored to you?
I think that trust is a big one, and it's funny because I don't even think about that anymore. It's been so long. So the trust has definitely been restored. I think that it's hard to put into words truly everything that he's restored. Our kids I think a big thing was I was concerned of how this was going to affect them. And Matt and I just this weekend we were talking about how faithful the Lord has been through all of this, and how we still can go back and remember those moments. Like he thought about it this weekend, going back to the moment of being broken in that kitchen and everything God's done since then. And we with our kids, I'm like, they're okay. And the Lord has really protected them. And just this weekend, we our daughter was blasting worship music in her room, and it's just like a little just gift, I feel like, that the Lord gives us, and it's like, hey, they're okay. He protected them through all of it. Our daughter Sophie is going to school to be a counselor, and I asked her, what specifically she wanted to specialize in, and she said family restoration. so um I think our kids have really been restored our family within our family. And then trust, I feel like relationships too he's restored. This was really difficult for my family and his family to walk through this with us, and we had to have some hard conversations with parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents, and that has fully been restored as well. Our intimacy has been restored in all aspects. And we did do intensive counseling to help that make that happen. So anyone who's going through that, I think that is absolutely necessary, and it's okay to ask for help in that area. And we still see a counselor. We have a joke with our counselor. We've sent so many people to him. We're like his number one referral. And so, but it's just so important. And he has helped us with restoring our intimacy as well.
That's amazing. Well, and what I love is that, some people can see what the Lord's done on the outside, but your kids were a part of the miracle. Like they were there from ground zero, they saw everything. And for them to see only God can do this kind of miracle, I mean, that must have been like such God must have become so real to them. And
Mhm.
what a good father, God, to restore mommy and daddy and
Yes.
have it better than ever. Have it better
Yeah.
than ever now. Is there a specific scripture or scriptures that you stood on during this time or even afterwards, or even one that you would recommend to anybody who's listening who might be dealing with some things in their marriage?
Yeah, there's so many verses and passages to stand on, and I was thinking about that. I'm like, what would I say? But I think if I'm really being honest, what I stood on at that time in my life was that he would never leave me nor forsake me, because you can feel so alone in that. And I just stood on the promise that he was going to be there through all of the times, the hard ones, the times whenever I was so broken I couldn't sleep. He was there. Whenever I was having hard times with the kids, he was there. I just think that. And that goes back to Deuteronomy. I looked it up too again before our call, but Deuteronomy 31:8. And so I stood on that. Another one would be Psalm 23, such a beautiful passage of God being our shepherd. And that's still kind of my life verse, that I stand on, is Psalm 23. And just remembering who he is, and his promises.
Powerful.
Yeah.
So good.
Mhm.
So good. It's such a powerful story of how God is even there in the mess that looks like a mess, but he's right there. And as I hear you sharing your story, I hear you pressed into the Lord. You didn't run from the Lord, but you pressed into him in a time when a lot of people will turn their back on the Lord because they don't see him in it. And I feel like even you sharing about praying in that time before the divorce, that the Lord was preparing you even in that season when you were praying for what, but you were pressing into him so that you were ready to weather the storm that was coming. You didn't even know what the outcome would be, but you were pressing into him. And I think that's so powerful for anybody, whether it's marriage or any kind of situation. Sometimes when we're in those situations, we can tend to curl up in a ball and want to hide and not really press into the Lord, but he's our answer. And that's really, that's a big takeaway for me from what you shared, to press into the Lord, because he's the one that's the answer. Our spouse, we can't change our spouse. We can't change those things, but boy, we can press into him and entrust them to him and watch him work in their life. And I believe that's what enabled the Lord to work in Matt to get to that place, because you had released him. You weren't trying to fix him. And I think that's a big thing that I hear you say. And it's so powerful.
Thank you.
And once you did, the Lord was able to do it.
Right.
You know, and like you were saying earlier, I thought that was such an interesting statement that you made, Amber, that you were seeking a heart relationship with the Lord, but the other was intellectual. And it sounds like through this experience that he too has had a heart change for a heart relationship with the Lord, and that you two joined together now with both hearts totally geared for God, that he's just done really beautiful things.
Yeah. So powerful. Yeah. What is one thing you would encourage our listeners to do that may be having trouble in their relationship?
Yeah, I would just encourage them to surrender it, and surrender, like what you guys said, about how I had surrendered Matt over to the Lord too, because I think a lot of times we try to control it, and we do the same thing in a lot of our relationships. But I think I wanted to fix Matt myself. I wanted to I wanted to control him because I loved him, but I also I wanted to control the situation. It wasn't until I feel like I truly surrendered it that the Lord was able to do that and help Matt, and that Matt turned his life over to the Lord. And it also showed me too that he didn't do it for me, that he did it for himself and for the Lord. And so there is comfort in knowing that. And so if you try to control it, and they're trying to, like, okay, I'm going to do this to help you or make you happy or to fix it, it's almost like a Band-Aid on the situation. But fully surrendering it is where I feel like God can actually move and do something, and we're not in the way anymore.
So good. Well, thank you so much, Amber. Thank you for being willing to share your story. And Matt, or you can tell him, but if he's listening, thank you for being willing to, we have all made mistakes. They all look different. Like you said, you both went into the marriage with baggage that looks different on both sides. And you guys are just being really vulnerable, sharing your story. And it's not always easy to talk about things, but I like to refer to it sometimes. Ben and I, we've dealt with our own things in marriage too. And I look back and it's like, it was almost like a bad dream that didn't happen. And to be able to be so free and healed to where you can now share it openly, to where it's going to help other people, to me, is being more than a conqueror. That's coming out on the winning side and making the enemy eat what he meant to destroy. God's using it for good. And so thank you so much. I believe this will help people and minister to people. I love you as a friend, and I'm so thankful for everything that God has done. So listeners, we are going to conclude this episode of the podcast, but we will be with you next week on the Winning Response podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Winning Response with Jen and Crystal. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and rate this podcast, and we encourage you to share with others. If you want more information or want to connect, go to thewinningsresponse.com. Thanks for joining us today, and tune in next time on the Winning Response podcast.